you so much for joining me on my program once again. I appreciate you wherever you're joining me from. I say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Accept my greeting according to your time zone. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please kindly subscribe to my channel. Click the notification bell so that you'll be notified each time I upload a video. You can be among the first to receive it. Then go to the comment section at all time. Leave your comment, drop your contribution. If you have suggestions, make it out there. If you have any criticism, put it down on the comment section. It will make us to get better, presenting you a better program.
Number of people who were being uploaded and the number of political parties who were being uploaded for the presidential election could easily, possibly, not probably, but possibly, could have overwhelmed the system.
Good. INEC knew the number of voters. INEC knew their system. And the funny thing is that in the presidential election, you have only one constituency. Between the Senate and the House of Reps, you have about 469 constituencies. And in 469 constituencies, no glitch. He was going. That ought to crash more. Each constituency has its own 18 times 18 by 469. That ought to crash more. It did not crash. Nothing happened to it. In the presidency, one constituency. And they are telling you glitch. And they did not tell you the glitch before they started. And they said they tested. They did a mock examination.
Yeah, but with a limited...
They commenced. That's what I'm saying. That's sample.
With a limited number of...
That's sample.
Yeah,
it's allowed. And it worked. And they already knew their capacity. It's not as something that on that day was when they realized the number of voters. They already knew. And then they did not tell us that there was a glitch.
Right.
Until, do you know that after 48 hours, there was only one state that was announced within 48 hours. No beavers, no accredited voters, no as in transmission. You didn't tell us there was a glitch. It was when Nigerians started shouting. They said there was a glitch. Meanwhile, that there was a glitch is not an excuse. In law, when you want to defend yourself, general traverse is not a defense at all.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you
this. It has to be specific. Yeah. It has to be mentioned.
Right.
In which polling unit was there a glitch?
Right.
Throughout Nigeria, not one polling unit sent any result electronically to that server. Throughout the whole Nigeria, not one polling unit. There was no election. I put it to them.
Okay, well, you've made that point and you've made it stridently. But what I need to ask you is this. If or when this ends up in court and gets into the process of being decided by the courts, can you and Nigerians trust that it'll be a fair, independent process? Do you have faith in the judiciary when it comes to election suits?
Sadly, no. Sadly. And why am I saying that? Because they can give you Machina treatment. Bashiru Machina. Bashiru Machina, an innocent poor Muslim, trusting in his party, APC. Trusting the untrustable. He went for his primary, used his meager resources, contested. When he was contesting, Ahmed Lawan was contesting for the presidency. In front of everybody, Koro Koro. After that, APC said, Lawan is their nominee. Koro Koro. And when they went to court, Ahmed Lawan stopped at Court of Appeal and said he will not appeal. And their party, political party, went to appeal. And yet they gave order in favor of the Ahmed Lawan. Knowing that they cannot give order positively, they now relied on technicality. Meanwhile, justice, the present principle of law by the Supreme Court, is that you cannot terminate justice on the altar of sheer technicality. That is the position of the law. That Supreme Court denied the poor Bashiru Machina his nomination based on they would have used writ of summons instead of originating summons. Meanwhile, in the practice direction, they say you should use originating summons, meaning because they want to snatch it from him. Even if you had used it of someone, they said no. In the practice direction, you ought to use originating someone. But Machina said this is open robbery. And you know what? Unfortunately, I agree with him. So, whether I have my doubts, oh yes, because you can deliver judgment without delivering justice.
Incredible.
So what they are doing is delivering judgment, not delivering justice. So whether I have my doubts, Boku,
Okay.
plenty.
All right. Two quick things and very quickly.
Okay.
Can you define this relationship between Labour Party and PDP that we're beginning to see in the aftermath of this election? And secondly, the president-elect, Bola Tinubu, because he has been, he has been given a certificate of return by INEC, identifying him as Nigeria's next president. He has given 2 speeches today. And in those 2 speeches, they were reconciliatory, most people would say, extending the olive branch. In fact, mentioning political parties that were in the race with him, including the Labour Party, when he said the obedient. Are you saying you're not going to be extending your hand to receive that olive branch because you've gone to court? Are you considering it as a party?
What I am saying is that let him give us our mandate. We will do a better reconciliatory speech and thank him very well for giving us our mandates, and God will bless him. That's what we want him to do. Saying whether I will accept, I didn't even listen to it. I said there was no election. How can I be approbating and reprobating?
What's the relationship between Labour Party and PDP? Very quickly.
There is no relationship.
Okay.
What you have, when you, in that collation, you saw many agents there. Are they relating? Because they are sitting together. No.
You have joint press.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
That we had joint press conference because both of us are plaintiffs in this case. Does not mean we are relating.
Okay.
We have joint interests we want to address.
All right.
So there is no relationship.
Right. Kenneth, I want to thank you very much indeed. And before you go, let me make the point that we were supposed to have someone. We extended an invitation to the ruling APC party. They confirmed they were going to give us a guest. And then just 15 minutes before they were due to go on air, they said to us that the guest will no longer be available. So let's just be clear on that. Kenneth, I want to thank you very much indeed. And Kenneth Okonkwo is a Nollywood star, lawyer and spokesperson for the Labour Party's Presidential Campaign Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We wish
Please,
you the
I
best.
just want to make one comment. I don't want anybody to address me by any title again in Nigeria. Nobody in Nigeria today is honorable enough to bear any title. Worst of it, if you call me chief, because it sounds like thief. So please, I don't want, don't know doctor,
Okay,
no nothing.
we'll keep that in mind.
You only add minister because to know that I'm a man, especially in this modern time when people don't
Okay,
know
let's
whether you're a
go.
man.
Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much,
much indeed.
Mr. Kenneth Okonkwo. We're going to a quick break. I'll be right back with the special coverage of Nigeria's just concluded presidential and legislative elections. Stay with us.
You're watching special coverage of Nigeria's 2023 presidential election here on Arise News. I'm Charles Aniagolden.
I am Adesua Omoroan. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has presented the certificates of return to the winner of the 2023 presidential election, Bola Tinubu, and his vice presidential candidate, Kashim Shettima. At the presentation, Tinubu reiterated his commitment to the youths and promised to work to make Nigeria better.
This great project called Nigeria beckons to us all. It is bigger and more important than any partition divide. To my supporters, I ask you to continue to have faith in the mission that we have articulated. To those who didn't support me, I ask that you not allow the disappointment of this moment to keep you from realizing the historic national progress we can make by working together. We must join hands in this common endeavor to pull the nation through. In a phrase, I'm asking you to work with me. I may be the president in election, but I need you more Importantly, Nigeria needs you a lot more than just one person. My heart, my door are open to you. I ask you to come in so that we may begin the task of rebuilding our national home together, day by day, brick by brick. Where there is poverty, let us create prosperity and jobs. Where there is hunger, let us feed the people, chasing the hunger from our midst. Where there is no scarcity, let us rediscover the abundance. Where there is brutality, we may replace it with brotherhood. Where there is violence, stock the land, we may establish peace. Where others have erected temples to hatred and bias, we may reconstruct permanent monuments to compassion and abiding affection. History will record that this day as the moment when I officially stood before you as a president-elect. However, I would like to dedicate this day and record it as the moment that we vowed to come together to make Nigeria stand, shining forth as the beloved and brave republic that God created for all of us. We are committed to the progress, development, and renew the hope of Nigerians. God bless you.
Nigeria's president-elect, Bola Ahmed Tinubu there. Now, for more insight into the 2023 presidential election, let's turn to the latest election analysis from the specialist researchers at Nigeria's leading election assessment think tank, the Center for Democracy and Development, or CDD, here in Abuja. And for this, we're joined by Armsfree Ajanaku, the communications lead at the Center for Democracy and Development. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
My privilege to be here.
Now, we know that you issued your think tank a preliminary report on this election. Then you subsequently issued briefings. Now you've issued your final report. What are the top lines of that report?
So the top lines from that report are basically some of the issues we had flagged in the pre-election period, where we talked about the 5 I's that will shape the way the process will play out. And the very first one of the 5 I is the I of identity. We have seen that identity played a huge, phenomenal role in the way this election has played out. And looking at that, we saw identity in 3 contexts: ethnic identity, religious identity, and intergenerational identity. Wherein you had a new generation of voters interrogating the status quo and pushing, and we also are seeing from the outcomes that these issues played out. Then we talked about the I of the institution, talking about INEC. From our preliminary reports, the very first issue we flagged was the dismal logistics outing that INEC recorded in these polls. And the fact that the crisis communication from INEC did not really respond to some of the issues that started playing out in the process. So that allowed for a narrative that something untoward was happening with the process. And for us, looking at the elections, we believe that it was really a mixed bag. And if what the president-elect is doing now, trying to put up rhetoric that will calm frayed nerves and also reach out to the people on the other side of the aisle is actually a reflection of a number of the issues we had flagged in the build-up to the election. We also made a very strong point about the role that online misinformation and disinformation has played in this election. And we have seen that playing out on social media in the kinds of narratives we have seen there, and the fact that the country is really divided, it's really polarized, and this has been another very strong issue that has shaped the election.
Well, in your final report, actually, let me go back, because you just talked about identity. This was pre-election, and I wanted to find out if religious and ethnic sentiments played on that, the identity you're talking about, and how much of that did we see in this election? Because we did hear from all the candidates pre-election talking about the unity of the country and how, religion and ethnicity or region should not be the focus of the election. However, when you talk about identity, and as the researchers and the eye on ground, what did you see?
So what we saw was that even where the candidates pretended that they wanted to be statesmanly, they wanted to rise above the fray, they still weaponized identity. They still used identity, especially ethnic and religious, to reach out to voters. In fact, the report...
Yeah, but how did that manifest itself?
Yeah, so how it manifested itself is some of the issues we saw playing out in places like Lagos. We saw also playing out in places like Anambra, where you had voters being harassed to vote for particular candidates on the basis of, okay, this candidate is from this part of the country, and we have to win here to legitimize our identity. This place belongs to us, and so we need to win here. And so if you saw one of the videos from the Lagos polling unit where someone was saying, you can't come here and vote for a particular candidate. If you want to vote for that candidate, relocate from Lagos and go to the place where that candidate came from. So we believe that this was a big issue, and that was why in the build-up to the election, we called on the candidates to think more pan-Nigeria, to think in terms of the country and the future of the country rather than sectional divides and primordial sentiments.
And I mean, after all said and done, what would you say has emerged as the salutary lesson about this election process? I mean, there was a lot of talk about the beavers, the IREV electronic system, and all the rest of it, because that really is at the heart of the perception that INEC has failed Nigerians.
Yes, so that perception is really, it has a lot of legitimacy in it, and the people who are really not in sync with the outcome that has we have seen in this election, they really have a legitimate grievance. But at the Center for Democracy and Development, we work on the basis of data. We look at what the data tells us, and if we look at the data, we ask ourselves, the issues, the areas where you had irregularities, were they widespread enough to make the outcome not to be credible? You are talking about over 176,000 polling units. And so we want not just to base our judgments on anecdotes, we want to also see what the data says. And from what the data says, we believe that the people who were affected, by voter suppression, we should look into how to redress the issues they have faced. The people who are faced by voter intimidation, we need to look at their legitimate claims, which is why in the recommendation of this report, one of the major recommendations is for INEC to sit down with all civil society organizations which have put out 1 or 2 reports out there and do an audit of the process, because the election is not just an event, it's a cycle. In a matter of a few days, we'll be talking about the process in the states, what is going to play out in the states, and then thereafter we're talking about the off-cycle election. So we believe from the CDD that we need to be able to move forward with the fundamental lessons learned from here, and the only way we can move forward with those lessons is to be able to sit down with all the stakeholders, sit down with INEC, where did you get it wrong? Why was it that on election day, as at the time polling was supposed to have opened, less than 50% of polling polls at polling units had opened? Why was it that when the IREF started having issues, like they later came out with a statement to say there were issues, why were they unable to do proper communication to allow the people know that these are issues that they are facing? And so you calm the nerves of people, unlike what now happened. They came in much later, where there were now narratives about the fact that INEC wanted to rig the process. And so these are some of the issues we believe that when we sit down as stakeholders, not just CDD, there were other civil society organizations that had their situation roomed. We'll compare the data, and then we'll be able to move forward with the key lessons learned, and also implement those key lessons, not just for us to sweep it under the carpet and wait for another electoral cycle, and then we are faced with the same problem. But we can also take some positives. This report also documented some of the positives. The fact that in the last 3 general elections, this is the very first time we are having a situation that the election was not postponed. We went ahead with the election.
Some would say it would have been better to postpone this election than to go into what we had, with delayed arrival, long waits at the polling units, voting into the night, cancellation and all of that. Would it not have been better to have postponed?
Yes, but even if you look at the last the general elections in which we postponed, we still had the same situations. We still had the same situations of voting into the night. 2015, we voted into the night. 2019, we voted into the night. So it shows that there is something fundamentally wrong about the logistics strategy that INEC has deployed over the years. And if we must move forward, and moving forward to a brighter future for the electoral process, I think INEC needs to rethink its logistics, because from what our experts even put together at the CDD, this has been something that has happened over and over again in Nigeria, right from during the National Electoral Commission under Humphrey Nwosu. It has always been a logistic issue. And one of the issues that was identified is the fact that INEC has to subcontract the logistic process, especially with transport and all of that. It is not in control of all of that. Now, when you look at also the architecture within INEC itself, the states, the resident electoral commissioners, that's the INEC offices across the state, also need to be held accountable, because all of the attention sits and focuses on INEC at the headquarters. We also believe that the state offices also need to do.
That's a good point.
Exactly, because they are the ones who, if INEC headquarters says bring 50 vehicles to move materials, they will end up bringing like 25. They also take, and there is an extent to which INEC headquarters can actually, push them to do certain things. So they are also the weak chain. Right. We see them as a weak chain in the logistics deployment of INEC.
Right. Well, what are your thoughts about the level of turnout in this election? I mean, incredibly, shockingly low, wasn't it? I mean, I think it was just about 27%. What happened to those high expectations? Is it that an awful lot of Nigerians didn't fancy any of the people on the ballot, or is that INEC's voter register that was faulty, or is it that there was so much voter suppression, as some, the opposition have alleged, that people simply didn't get the chance to vote?
For us, we think it's a multiplicity of these factors that you have mentioned. These factors definitely combine to produce the very disappointing outcome we saw in terms of voter turnout. If you look at the figures from 2019, look at the figures from 2015, you definitely have to come to the conclusion that Nigeria is experiencing democratic decline in terms of the people's participation in the process. And when you look at the humongous amounts that have been expended in ensuring that PVCs are printed, ballot papers are printed, the whole preparation, and you see this kind of figure, it is really, really, really disappointing. When I saw the figures yesterday, I was actually in the NTA studios when the figures were released, and I shook my head, because how do we explain to the international community, our friends who have really solidarized with us, and also to know that in this election there are many other African countries that would be having elections this same year, Liberia, Sierra Leone, who have come to do what I'll call some form of internship.
Absolutely.
Yeah, from Nigeria, to learn and to go back home and replicate. So we have not put up a good showing in terms of the turnout of voters, and I think also the cumbersome nature, that the fact that the process was not seamless, even on voting day. So PVC collection was not seamless. It was difficult. It was Herculean for many citizens. You come to the voting process. It was also not. This report, for instance, captured a situation in which you had polling units that had very few number of voters, and then you had polling units. In fact, in FCT, there was a polling unit that had an excess of 4,000 voters, and they had only 2 BVAS machines for the 4,000 people. And so you had a situation in which voters were sleeping in the polling unit just to exercise their franchise. And we also documented in our data a situation in which many people waited on the queues for so long, and they had to go back home in frustration. So these are, some of the key issues that have defined the process. And I will also think that voter suppression played a role, especially in a place like Lagos, in places like Anambra, where people use ethnicity to scare away voters. Insecurity also played a role. We saw in Bayelsa, the voting had to be pushed forward to the following day in 141 polling units. So when you combine all of these, you see that the electoral process needs to also go through an overhaul, and INEC cannot come out without some flags in this process, but we are also very careful not to dampen confidence in the process, because if we go on just talking about the negatives and we don't highlight some of the things that have also worked, then you will be communicating to citizens and further enhancing the democratic decline that we have seen in this process.
Indeed, and there was enough responsibility to go around. Let's talk about the responsibility for the security as well, because in your final report you said 4 things or 4 issues shaped this election. One was the operational challenges on election day, another was the use of technology, violence and voter suppression, and as well as voter behavior, influence of money, and online falsehood. I'm interested in influence of money, but we'll get to that. So let's talk about violence and voter suppression. The Nigeria police deployed over 300,000 personnel. With sister agencies, that number came to over 400,000. What did CDC on ground? Did those numbers match what was on ground? And how do we go from, physically policing our elections to get rid of this violence we talk about every election cycle?
Yes.
Is it even possible?
Yeah. So, the deployment was the information around what the police was deploying and all these other security agencies. It was out there for everybody to see. But even beyond the data, just going online, seeing the videos online of places where ballot boxes were snatched, gunmen invading some of those polling units, shooting and all of that, scaring away voters. Voters, had to scamper for safety. If you look at all of that, you then ask the question, why was the security response reactive rather than proactive? Yes, we know that there is a certain distance, between the polling unit and where the security cordon, around those areas can be. But I think in those instances we saw, the security failed those voters. In fact, where you had that particular polling unit in Lagos, where a thug came to the polling unit and was threatening a voter, and he was not immediately picked up and brought to justice. You saw that those kinds of behavior also sent a message out there to the other thugs that they could just overrun the process. And we saw whole communities where voting was supposed to take place The thugs came there, overran the place. Then it took hours before security could respond. So when we look at those instances, even though we don't want to say, okay, we want to extrapolate from that to say that is, what the entire terrain was like, it is worrisome, and it's not a good. The optics are really not good for Nigeria, especially given the investment and given the confidence and the goodwill that the international community has put in this election.
Right. Let me ask you this. It may not necessarily be directly within your province, but then you guys are an election assessment think tank. So you've got a lot of experience in these matters, and you may be able to advise us on that. The Constitution stipulates that whoever emerges must gain the highest number of votes and also win 25% of 2/3 of the states in Nigeria and the Federal Capital Territory. So is the FCT essentially counted as a state, and Mr. Tinubu was able to reach the threshold in 27 states?
Yes, so we know that this was going to be a very major talking point, given the very competitive, nature of this race, and we saw the way the race played out. Indeed, very keen competition, which is why we put out a kind of advisory, which we also did jingles around, titled "How Winners Emerge." And in that, in that document, which we also circulated, we did jingles around it. I'm sure Arise also, ran some of those jingles. We made it very clear there that this, are the provisions, the 25%, and the FCT, was the FCT was, part of, those the 25%, we talked about. So the FCT is actually included,
right?
Yeah, in that. And I think from the numbers I saw, if you look at the FCT votes, maybe they could rig them up. You would see that the president-elect actually made 25% from what I saw there, because he had around 90,000 votes, and when you compare that to Peter Obi, who won around 200,000 votes and all of that. So I think that satisfies that requirement.
Right. Okay.
Interesting. Now let's go back to that issue that shapes the election. According to you, the voter behavior, but particularly the influence of money. How widespread was that in this election? Because that was a major issue for the President Muhammadu Buhari administration. Absolutely.
That was another major talking point in this election. And in this 14-page, very crisp and very very interesting report.
It's your report.
Yes.
If you might say so yourself.
Yes. Yeah, but it's very, why I said that is it's very easy to access. We didn't make it too complex, to read. It's a quick read that you can read in 30 minutes. So when we look at that particular issue, our data here showed that, yes, the influence of money was drastically reduced in this election. But did it also mean that vote buying became a thing of the past in this election? The answer is a resounding no, because the politicians still found ways to circumvent the fact that the place was not awash with cash. They found ways to circumvent that, and how they did that was they designed other very smart ways to bypass that. They used codes, which they shared, with voters, on election day, to where the voter votes, and then they use a code to make transfers. There were issues like that. Then we also saw attempts to move monies around. In Lagos, there was the arrest of a fellow who had around 32 million, on him, which the EFCC believed was for vote buying. We also saw the case in Rivers, where in the excess of around $500,000 was found with a House of Reps aspirant, I think. So the point is that voter inducement remained a big issue in this election, and some of the political parties also use things like foodstuffs. They use wrappers as means of voter inducement. So while the influence of money was drastically reduced as a result of the policy, there were ways the politicians still found to circumvent that.
Do you think there are enough grounds for people who oppose this result to take it further, go to court and seek redress? I mean, I know you'd say that's part of the process, but from your own assessment, is there enough evidence, enough grounds for them to take it there and perhaps stand a chance?
Yes, so our response to that is that in the specific areas where those infractions happen, there has to be accountability. The people who, for instance, lost their lives, they need justice. We have to give those people justice. So the people who were disenfranchised, we need to talk to them. And that is why it is soothing that the president-elect, when he picked up his certificate of return, was talking more in terms of let's build the nation, let's come together, trying to bring that message of unity, that message of healing. And I said yesterday in another outing that I expected the president-elect to speak directly to all the people in this process whose rights have been violated.
Right.